Hi, everyone. Welcome to Lisi's live stream or podcast, depending on how you are consuming this information. Today, it is Ask Me Anything, website design and development. I'm Taryn Elliott. I'm your host today. I will be flying solo, and I am Lisi's Director, Client Success and Marketing. So I work with our clients generally after their website is launched on some of the things that they come up with every day. But of course, I'm also very much a part of the design and development as needs to be for our clients. So we are going to dig right into these questions. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. I will be grabbing those as we go along. But the first question that I wanted to start with that was previously submitted is, what is the difference between a website design and website development? I thought this was a good one to start with because it kind of lays the foundation for all of the other questions we will be addressing. And a lot of people don't realize that design and development are actually two separate parts of the project. So design is the first part of the project where we're laying out each page and really considering the user experience, how they navigate through the website, not just what it looks like, but how they get from page to page, what journey the user is taking through the website, any features that you want to make sure that you have on your website are discussed in the design phase. Content strategy is also really important. We want to understand what content we're putting on each page so we can create the structure for it and design for it. And then development is the part of the project where you structure the website. And there are two parts of development, actually. There is back-end development, which is where the CMS or the content management system is actually customized to consist of all of the custom post types and fields. So for most of the websites we design, but for a lot of people, there's always customization. So that way the website is tailored for your specific needs. So for us, for a law firm, some things that we're looking at in this back-end development are, does the website have a verdict section? Do they want a blog? Is there a bio that needs a bar admission section, or is that just something that's in the general text of the bio? Are we associating practice areas with different things? Maybe we're associating practice areas with news or associating practice areas with bios. So these decisions are made during the design phase, and then they're built out in the back-end development phase. The next part is front-end development, and this is where all the pieces come together. This is where any custom functionality, such as, say, accordion menus or sliders or parallax scrolling, that was conceived in the design phase is built out as we convert the design from graphics to the actual code. So the back end of the development is essentially tied into the front end of the development, so that way your content management system can feed into the website. So really, we do the design, and then once we have the look and feel that we want for the website and have the user experience the way that we want it, we get to the back end development, which is time consuming. On generally, a lot of the ball is in our court on that part, and we are just converting all of those visuals into the interactive and dynamic website that you see, and that works in the way that we imagined it would in the design phase. Okay. Our next question, will I own the website once it's launched? Our answer to this question is yes. Once your website is built, which is custom tailored for you and your law firm, it is yours to do with whatever you would like. You own that website. Now, the one caveat to this is that some of our competitors or some other organizations that build websites do lease the website. And the benefit to this is that it can be less expensive, or it might be financially easier for a firm to take on this, so-called leased website versus the full build out and owning of the website. The downside of that is if you change companies, you can be left with nothing. Your website's kind of tied to that entity, and if you no longer have a relationship with that entity, you kind of have to start from scratch on a website. But really, the decision is based on what works best for you and your firm. But generally, the answer is yes, you own your website. Okay. Next question. What if changes need to be made? Who handles that? Okay, this is a great question because we go through, the process of building a website, which for a lot of law firms is one of the biggest marketing expenses that they'll have. It's one of the projects that takes the most time to get up and running. It's, pretty intense for the marketing team or the partners or both who are tasked with building the website. And there's definitely a sense of joy once the website is launched. But then what? The website is kind of a living creature, a living being that constantly needs changing and updating, a little bit like having small children. Take some time to get there. You have them, it's wonderful. And then, there's some more work that needs to happen. So when we build our websites with simplicity in mind, which any good designer and developer should be doing. But this is also one of the reasons we choose to build all of our websites custom, because when we're in the design and discovery phase, we're determining exactly what you need when it comes to your website and what you need to be able to change as your website is launched and moving forward. Also, part of this discussion is what your firm is comfortable doing. Some firms are very comfortable doing everything, and other firms want to have nothing to do with that. So we had these discussions early on during the discovery phase. And what comes out of those discussions is ultimately what informs the design and also the front and back end development. Once a website is launched, we or any other firm would train you on how to use your website and to make changes on your own. But we realize that this isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. Not everyone's comfortable with doing that. Not everybody has the time to do that. So we work with all of our website clients to really kind of carve out what makes the most sense and how we can be a true partner to them. So sometimes people are like, thanks for designing our website. We got it from here. Larger firms, maybe they even have somebody in-house who has a background with that. Smaller, mid-sized firms might be more comfortable saying, you know what, we want to be able to make these changes. We want to be able to add an attorney bio. We want to be able to, change some wording of this practice area. But for the really big stuff, adding pages, we want to let you handle that. And other firms will say, you know what, we don't have the time. We don't have the inclination. We don't have the experience to do that. And we're just going to let you handle all of that. So really, it is completely up to you. If you want to make changes, you should definitely have those conversations with your website team in the beginning, so that way your site can be designed so that way you can make the changes that you want to make and that you feel comfortable making. Okay. Again, if you have any questions, just drop them in the comments, but I have a question here that was pre-submitted. What services are part of building a website? Well, this is a question with a few different answers. The general scope of a website project consists of a design for both desktop and mobile. Both of those are important, so we always consider both. The back end and front end development, which we talked about a couple minutes ago. Content migration, which is basically taking all of the content from your old website and putting it into your new website, or any new content that was created, because for a lot of websites, it's a mix of old content and new content, or for some, it is all new. We've had run the gamut on all of those. So content migration, getting all of that over. And then quality assurance, which is basically going through page by page, element by element, and checking, does this work properly? Are there any typos? Is this rendering the way that we want? If we do this, does it cause something weird to happen? And then finally, we offer, and many firms offer, training on the CMS at no additional cost. Our philosophy is it's your website. You should know how to use it. And we should be ready and available to teach you that at any point. One thing we strongly recommend is that hosting and website security also be a service that is part of your website design and development. That being said, there are a lot of things that you can add on to a website project that really allow you to get the most out of your new website. This can be branding and logo design. Sometimes that goes hand in hand. A firm is just ready for a new brand, a new look, and they want to launch that whole look as their website is launching. As well as usually if you do a brand and logo redesign, you need to update the website anyway. A lot of clients are adding on writing, either taking what they already have and just editing it and refining it, or starting from scratch, rewriting everything, and pretty much everything in between. Ongoing website maintenance is something that you can add on. So this gets a little bit to how comfortable are you to making the changes and making sure that everything on your website is running the way that it should be. And search engine marketing. We all know that SEO, pay-per-click are important, and the foundation of both of those is your website. And this is something that we can add on before and definitely after launch for your website to make sure that, now that you have this great website, everyone knows about it and everyone gets to see it. There are some additional services even above and beyond this that sometimes get woven into a website project, and that can be marketing collateral, especially if you're doing a new brand or a new logo. So this is things such as letterhead, business cards, ads. One we get a lot now is social media graphics. Now that you have your new website or your new brand, you want to make sure that all your social media graphics really showcase that and that everything's consistent across the board. ADA compliance is something that is really big with websites, ongoing SEO, and photography, which is something that we don't provide, but we can provide recommendations for that. And a couple things that we're seeing a little bit more often is integrated chat and answering services. These are both things that are kind of becoming more popular. Integrated chat, especially as artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, become popular, or more and more popular, I should say. We're going to be seeing more and more of this as well. Okay. Next question is, what is the general process when developing a website? Well, I talked about a lot of the things we offer, but really the general process is pretty basic. It's discovery. And so this is when we meet with your law firm and the stakeholders in the project, be that partners, it can be associates, a marketing committee, a marketing department, a marketing chair, whoever is in charge of your project or whoever has a vested interest in it. We meet with them during discovery to really get an idea of who you are as a law firm and what you want your website to be, whether that's from a design aesthetic, whether that's from a functionality aesthetic. All of that is gone through in discovery. So that way, when we get to the next part of the process, design, we know what message we're trying to convey and how we're conveying it in the design. So design goes through a bunch of different iterations, but that's basically getting the look and feel of your website, along with discussing, what you want it to do, what you want your user experience to be, what journey your users are taking as they move through your website, what you want the outcomes to be. Once the design is set, we move to development, which we talked about pretty in depth a couple minutes ago. So that's the back end and front end development, really taking all those graphics from the design phase and moving them to the development phase. So that way your website, is a functioning website that does all the things you want it to do, both when you're on the page and in the background when you're adding things or making changes. Then we get to QA, which just stands for quality assurance. And this is, again, the part of your website process when we are going through, page by page, element by element, testing everything to make sure that it works. And then finally, there is launch. And this is always a very exciting day, both for our clients and for our team. We love seeing new websites launch out into the world, and just the excitement around that, both by internal and external stakeholders. So those are pretty much the general process. One thing that we do sometimes see is phase 2. So you design the website, you launch it, but sometimes as you're going through that, things come up that are either out of scope from the original discussion, or it's decided that it's really important that you have that on your website, but the time it would take to implement it, if you're a little bit behind, maybe something was discovered in development and it's going to take more time to implement, but you still want to launch on time. Those are things that will move to, say, a phase 2 list. And that is something that we then look at after launch and say, okay, what are these things do we want to do? What is our process for making these happen? What is our timeline? And how will we go about launching those phase 2 projects? Okay. Next question is, what does it mean when an agency says they outsource projects? This is a really good question because not everybody knows what this means. And not everybody is really upfront about this. You'd be surprised. There are a lot of agencies that white label the international development of their websites to keep costs down. And basically that just means that they say, we developed this website and this is ours. We've found that things can get lost in translation if you're outsourcing projects internationally, and that time it takes to get the project back on track drives cost up. So it's not always effective. This is not something that we do, but if this is something that is important to you and your law firm to know this is definitely a good question you ask. Do you outsource the projects? And if you do outsource the projects, who do you outsource them to? Okay. Oh, I like this next question. What is an ADA accessible website? I keep hearing about those. We talk, in LISI about ADA accessible websites pretty much because we know that a quarter of the population has a disability. So there are a lot of reasons to create an ADA accessible website, but we just don't like the idea that so many people might be precluded for interacting with our website in the way that you intended, when really we can just make some changes so that way it's more accessible, more usable, creates a better user experience for everyone. We have some information. There's also some legal ramifications that we're starting to see around the idea of ADA accessible websites, and we'll keep seeing that. But it's just a good thing to do. So creating an ADA accessible website is best discussed during the design phase and the development phase. But specifically, the earlier the better, so that way we know exactly what we're going to do to create a website that is accessible to as many people as possible. So some things you can do to create an ADA accessible website is to use an easy to read font. Some fonts are easier to read than others, especially on screens. I know, for example, some fonts are a lot easier for people with dyslexia to read than others. We talk about that a lot internally as well. So not only do you want an easy to read font, but you want it to be a strong contrast to the background, so that way it sticks out. So that way it's easy for people to read, especially people who might have vision problems. Next, when writing, use periods after each letter of an abbreviation or an acronym. Kind of the general rule of thumb is you use a period when you would say the letters. You don't need a period when the letters, make a word. For example, I would use a period after ADA because a screen reader would read that as ADA, not ADA. I do not use a period after LISI, even though it's LISI for Legal Internet Solutions Incorporated, it is pronounced LISI. So that's a good rule of thumb around using periods. That's a really easy change you can make, both in design and development and generally just as you're pushing content out. Around how you hyperlink text, for SEO, linked text should be underlined and a contrasting color to ordinary text so people know specifically this is a hyperlink. Also, for the user experience, the more people know what are hyperlinks, the more likely you will have them clicking through to other pages on your website. And then there's some accessibility issues that you can really explore around how you traverse the website. So a lot of people use a mouse to traverse the website, but that's not always possible. Sometimes you need to use a touch screen, sometimes you need to use a joystick, or sometimes you need to use a keyboard to navigate the website. So one thing that you can do is use the tab button for the keyboard navigation that follows the same visual order as your content. Breadcrumbs and jump links also help users to be able to easily search and consume content on your website. And finally, if your website uses forms, just make sure that the fields are labeled in a clear and easy to understand manner. This is where we get to screen readers again. Screen readers need to be able to say exactly what goes where. So this really alleviates challenges for sight impaired users trying to correctly enter their data. And the more that we move toward form fills to reach out and contact, the more that we are looking to get form fills to get some of that marketing information, the more important that becomes. Okay. All right. Next question. Do you need to interview a firm's clients in order to produce a website? The simple answer to that is no. We know a lot of our clients say, we don't want you to talk to them. We're already asking them, to participate in chambers or to give a testimonial or whatever way. Like, this is just one more thing. So no, if you're worried about that from any standpoint, we do not need to talk to the firm's clients to produce a website. Okay. This is a question we get a lot. Why can't I build my website myself? And the answer is you can. There are a ton of tools out there at your disposal to build your own website. There are templates. You can change the colors. You can customize them. You can definitely do this. For a solo attorney who's maybe on a really tight budget, this might make sense. We have found that for a bigger firm, it's going to save you a lot of time and a lot of hassle to hire an agency. We've gone through all of the different considerations to think about when designing and developing your website, when not only making the user experience really positive, but also making the experience you have when inputting information on the back end easy. Those things are really, really more effective and efficient if you work with an agency who does this every day and who can really take that off of your plate and get you, a website that is representative of your law firm and also easy to use. Okay. Should I expect support once my website goes live? We've talked about support a little bit, but the answer to this really is, if you want, then yes. Usually, you get what you pay for, and there's a lot of options once websites go live, in a lot of ways that agencies will approach that. Sometimes some agencies will wrap that support all up in the price of the design and development. Some agencies will, offer services for a monthly fee. Some agencies will sell the website as a service and they will do everything. Some agencies will develop the website and just send you on your way. So the answer is yes, to the extent that, a reputable agency should always stand behind their work. But how much support you want, again, depends on your comfort level with making changes yourself, keeping your website updated yourself. And so really, you can run the gamut for how you approach the level of support that you want once your website goes live. Another thing to consider here is also that WordPress gives you a lot of flexibility. We almost always build our websites on WordPress, on the WordPress platform, sorry. That way, anybody can go in and make changes, who understands WordPress. There are a lot of people who know how to use WordPress. Some proprietary websites do not give you that option. Again, any reputable agency will always stand behind their work, but that's something to consider when you're deciding how you want to build your website. Okay. And final question, it looks like we're at about 25 minutes, so I don't want to go too much longer than that, but the question is, I know there are some considerations that need to be made because of the rules of professional conduct with regards to marketing. What are those and how do you handle that? So this answer to this question really depends on where you live and where you practice. The ethical issues around what images can be used, how people are portrayed. Again, it really varies. This is something, though, that we definitely talk about as we are creating design and producing content for your website. It is a part of image selection. It is a part of the messaging that we use. So really, those issues that you're looking at when you are writing or when you are choosing images for your other advertising or how you have to submit that, those apply to your website as well. I know something that varies by state is testimonials, and this is something that definitely impacts websites. Some states allow testimonials, therefore we can use them on websites. Other states do not allow testimonials, and therefore that is not something that we would consider as part of our design process. Another thing to think about and to definitely research is some states require you to put advertising material on all of your marketing. So this includes your website. That means making sure that you have that verbiage for advertising material exactly where it needs to be on your website. Sometimes it needs to be on the top. Sometimes they don't care where it is. Sometimes it needs to be a certain size. Definitely look at that. If you are a multi-state law firm, or depending on if you're a multi-state law firm, you definitely need to look at all of the states where you have offices. Beyond that, we're also exploring, what it means to have a website, what it means to have a physical office, and what rules of professional conduct are regulating that as relates to marketing. So with the rise of remote work, that becomes an issue. With the idea that anyone from any state can access your website, that becomes an issue. So that's just something to consider. That's still a little murky. But generally, how your website approaches the rules of professional conduct is going to align with how your law firm approaches other forms of advertising, billboards, print ads, etc. That's generally, those rules of professional conduct were not written with the idea of websites in mind. And I know we've gone even further than that. So depending on your state, they may or may not have been edited to include websites, but general rule of thumb, follow the spirit for which those rules were written to make sure that your website is in compliance. Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this Ask Me Anything on website design and development. It was great to get to do this. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone. And please join us next week for our Lisi live stream at 12:30 on Friday, where Julie Ackerman will be bringing us another Behind the Bio. Bye, everybody. Thanks.